Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulih al-Kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Let me just send these really quick to our little WhatsApp group to let everybody know what's going on here. And so the reason why I wanted to do another follow-up video connected obviously to this horrible situation that has occurred with Blake, Barakat, and Wisam Sharieff is because I also feel like maybe the conversation that we're having around this is maybe not being pushed in the right direction. So let me clarify what I mean by that. So again, we're all completely, blown away by, what this, by what has transpired, by what has happened. But when I see some of the conversation happening, and not just from, and I don't mean this in a elitist way, but what I mean when I see the conversation taking place, and it's with, what I would call like rank and file Muslims, like people who are not imams or people involved in institution leadership or building. It's not to imply that, if you're just a regular Muslim, somehow you're of lesser, value or whatnot. But what I mean is that we're the people that are going to be responsible for moving forward with any kind of institutional changes that will help build further safeguards so that this tragedy, to the best of our ability, bi-iznihi ta'ala, cannot happen again. And so when I'm addressing this issue, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, right? This is just constructive criticism. And B, it's not meant to, be elitist in any kind of way. But it is important that we have the conversation about what has transpired so that going forward, we make, inshallah, the correct changes. So a friend of mine, friend and colleague, who's a young imam, Quran reciter, he posted something this morning. And so the name doesn't matter. So I'm just going to read a portion of what he read as it relates specifically to the actions here. So he said, I've been away from Facebook for some time, but I did want to come back to address this issue that has happened with, Wisam Sharieff and what he did. He said, while it's obvious that, ulama and imams and scholars are obviously not infallible, what we're dealing with and what we've witnessed is not merely a minor error as it relates to character. He says, quote, "This situation highlights a broader issue of individuals being given platforms despite lacking the necessary qualifications and, more concerningly, failing to embody the values our deen requires," end quote. And so I'm using his words because I think they're a pretty good summary of a lot of the language that I've seen surrounding this issue. And it's a really, let's break it down really quick so you can understand what my criticism is about. So he says, the situation highlights a broader issue of individuals being given platforms. Well, let's talk about platforms. So platforms, sure, anybody can have a cell phone and a social media account, and they can kind of make a platform for themselves. But even in that, a person doesn't make a platform without either A, some institution behind them helping to broaden or expand or amplify that platform. And then B, and perhaps most importantly, the public, the people engaging in that help to also expand and amplify, right, that platform. So this is what I'm saying, is that if we're going to have this conversation and we're really going to learn from this heinous crime, and to be quite honest, learn from some of our mistakes, then we have to acknowledge that we all have some role to play. No, none of us are responsible for Wisam having those impulses, those desires, the evilness that resided in his soul. None of us can take responsibility for that. But when it comes to issues of platforming, that is something that we all need to, I think, have a much more honest and soul-seeking conversation about. What does it even mean? What is social media to us? I mean, I think there was a brother years ago that came up and sort of coined a phrase, the fiqh of social media. And, you know, while that might sound a little bit, you know, contrived, or, you know, in some ways it's true. I think, you know, perhaps we don't have to word it as the fiqh of social media, right? But I do think we need to ask the question, well, what is social media to us? What is it? Is it entertainment? Is it for gaining benefit? Is it for gaining knowledge? And here's the thing. Those three things, entertainment, knowledge, benefit, are not evil in of themselves, and therefore are not blameworthy in and of themselves. And they all have a place to some degree or another. Wa alaikum salam. You know, they all have their place. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing? What years ago, this is going back to probably like the late 90s, early 2000s, probably the late 90s. So I used to work for NPR. So I used to actually work in radio. And so when some people say, oh man, you have a radio voice. Well, that's because I actually used to work in radio. And I remember one time we had a staff meeting at the radio station, and the station director, his name was Art. And one time we were having a discussion about programming, and what were some ideas going forward for programming. And he said something really interesting that stuck with me all of these years. And he said that there's two ways you can operate as a radio station. You can either try to attempt to lead your listening market by saying, well, these are the songs that I picked to play because I think that these musicians are interesting, or whatever it is. Or you can allow the market to dictate you. And so whatever people like, that's what you're going to play. And that lesson has always kind of stuck with me. And I think to some degree, that is what we have now. We're not really sure, both as imams and as an audience, what is social media to us? As imams or scholars that are on social media, increasingly, well, if I do a video on explaining the significance of, Allah swearing oaths by created things, and so doing a tafsir of Surah Ash-Shams, I'm probably only going to get maybe 20 views if I'm lucky on that. But if I do something about homosexuality, or if I do something about, something controversial like feminism or whatnot, it's what we now call today clickbait, right? It's going to have the controversial value to it, of which you can't blame the imams wholly for doing, because, sure, it's important to talk about all of those things. But are we talking about them genuinely from a point of view where we're concerned that somehow somebody might be truly misguided that same-sex acts are impermissible and are an abomination, or there may be aspects of feminism that might not be might not be compatible with Islam, but not be lead to a good life and to a good hereafter. That's a whole different type of engagement, um, versus, well, what's going to get traction. And so when he's saying here, the situation highlights a broader issue of individuals being given platforms despite lacking the necessary qualifications. Well, what are those qualifications? I mean, these things, I think this is where, even though I criticized the individual yesterday because his comments were sloppy, right? If you had refined your comments, then I think there could have been some measure of truth to what you're saying. So you take the statement, right, that individuals are lacking the necessary qualifications. Well, what are those qualifications? I do not believe that as Muslims in America that we have adequately defined what are the qualifications to be able to speak publicly, and to not only speak publicly, but to teach publicly and to instruct publicly and to take the responsibility for the tutelage of Muslims in their religion that will be what they will take into the grave until the hereafter. Well, what exactly are those qualifications? I mean, it is interesting, and we can criticize the Christians up and down on, of course, their theological stances. But it makes, at least they have a sort of apparatus of ordainment. It's very interesting. Imam Suhaib and I, hafadhahullah, may Allah preserve him. We were actually just talking about this yesterday. This idea of, of ordainment. And of course, we don't want to necessarily ape and imitate the Christians and things. And we're not saying that there's anything deficient in Islam that will be completed by Christianity. But what we're saying is, from a social point of view, from a structural point of view, this is an obvious issue of that not only are individuals maybe not meeting the qualifications are not tightly defined. The other aspect of, and even if we take that and then carry the baton, right, another step. If you want to become a doctor or an engineer, or if you just want to finish any degree, you want to get a degree, like I have a degree in literature, right? You're not going to complete that degree on your own. You will have to attend class with other students. You will have to sit with many different teachers and professors throughout your educational journey. And so you don't arrive at that on your own. And so one of the big issues that I see today with the Wisam Sharieff phenomenon, because he's not the only one. Obviously, what he did is way beyond the pale of imagination. But what's important to think about this from a certain light is that a big problem is that people are handed literally like a baton. Here you go. Here's your papers. Here's your unspoken, often, certification that we as community members, and that we as boards of masajid, and we as people of this or that institution, we're handing you this so that you can go now and speak in front of the people. Well, who continues to monitor what you're doing? Who continues to monitor your progress? Who continues to monitor your actions to some degree? What we have is individuals that are allowed to go off and do these things, and there's no oversight. And so I'm not saying that we can prevent evil entirely. Obviously, the other major half, and in my opinion, at least 51% of this insane equation is definitely the mom. Because again, if a mother is willing to offer up their own child on the altar of Satan, proverbially and apparently almost literally, then obviously this is why only one half of this is a conversation about Wisam and about imams and so on. But to that, I want to talk about what can we do better as imams? What can we do better as ulama? What can we do better as board members as people that are, people who are responsible for institutions. And so what I'm concerned is that this will become like a great bonfire of burning the effigy of Wisam Sharieff and then going back to status quo, only waiting for the next mushroom that's growing in the dark to pop up again and do something heinous, and we're not doing anything whatsoever. And so when we ask we ask questions, but I don't know if we've actually even pondered them, right? This situation highlights a broader issue of individuals being given platforms despite lacking the necessary qualifications. Well, like I said, we need to perhaps more tightly define and monitor, right? It should not be enough that you just memorize the Quran once or that you have a beautiful voice. What are you doing throughout your career as an imam, as a teacher, whatever, to not only, in some ways that there are some kinds of careers where you have to like re-up your qualifications or re-up your status in order to keep practicing what you do. And if we're talking about allowing people to have access to our soul, our heart, our children, our children's hearts, souls, and bodies, then this is the question we have to ask, like, should we not require some of these people to, including myself, like to go through things? Or is there a certain checks and balances? Right, and somebody said that I was throwing a Maghreb Institute under the bus. I'm not throwing a Maghreb Institute under the bus whatsoever. And again, this is why I don't want people to misconstrue. This is not, I'm not talking about the potential malfeasance of any individual institution. What I'm talking about is us as an entirety, how we need to change. He continued by saying that not only lacking the necessary qualifications and more concerningly, failing to embody the values of our deen that our deen requires. That also is something that is not an individual effort. We have turned Islam and its scholastic, component and tied it to a kind of performative public performance art of piety. We've all turned that into kind of like an Olympics. And what I mean by an Olympics is that it's just like an individual's Herculean effort of which they do these things. And this is also, in my opinion, a major failing that may not create the result of the Wisam Sharieff, but it does create the psychology of the Wisam Sharieff. And so, how does one embody the values of deen? Obviously, yes, there is a strong component of personal piety that is a major component of that. But personal piety is neither developed nor maintained in a vacuum. Personal piety includes, yes, okay, you pray every day and you fast every Ramadan and you pay your zakah and you you read your Quran. I think I can just speak for myself. It can be a struggle as an imam whose job is constantly teaching everybody else about Islam to have enough time that I carve out that, I got to read Quran for myself. And so part of what can help with that, I think, would be to kind of develop maybe like local fraternal chapters where imams, we get together once a month, and just, we don't do any business. We get together to be with each other, read Quran, do something, check on each other, because if we want indeed to, inshallah, embody the values of our deen, well, as corny as it may sound, right, the sunnah of this, there is no sunnah of the individual, right? The Prophet ﷺ spent time with his companions. That's why they're called his ashab, right? And so I think if we are taking, in particular, young people, and then turning them loose to become, overnight manufactured sensations that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, it came out to me apparently that he himself, and this is Wisam, apparently spoke of his struggles with internet pornography. To me, this is like a huge red flag that if that person is a person that struggles, which, okay, we don't want to demonize people for their struggles. Many people today, particularly men, struggle with the addiction to internet pornography. It is more addictive than fentanyl. That being said, maybe that's an individual that, especially if you made a public confession of that, maybe as an institute, as a board member, I don't care how popular you are, I don't care how nice your voice is, maybe you should be sitting in the halaqah that we offer versus you leading it, right? Now, if we're gonna have like a support group for people struggling with this or that addiction, pornography addiction, and you want to be a part of that and share your story of people trying to heal and come together to overcome something, that is an entirely different story. But for you to be put out there to just lead the masses, again, I think, well, who greenlit this person? And again, apparently this is a public statement. And so all the people that came in contact and touched this individual, again, it's already done, it's happened. And so this is not about trying to burn somebody else's effigy, right? This is all about how can we learn from things we have and are doing wrong, and how can we make structural changes to get them better. And so I think that I agree with him. He said, it truly pains me to see charlatans tarnishing the reputation of our sincere scholars. That's true, but we as sincere imams and scholars also have to take a due measure of responsibility to clean this mess up. And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pretty. But I believe that's what we have to do. And that we have to remember that Islam is a group effort. It's a group effort that requires a heavy amount of individual, input and individual effort. Right? I mean, even if I lead the prayer, you still, if you're praying behind me, you can't just go sit in the corner. You still have to pray too, even though I might be leading the prayer. Or if, Sheikh Fulan is leading the prayer, I mean, I still have to do my part behind him. And so I think, again, we need to rethink how we have accidentally, unwittingly, and of course, Shaitan doesn't sleep a lot and is always, has his machinations going of how he can trip us up. Innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. He is our enemy. And so we've been tripped up in the way that perhaps we have formulated the structure of our community and particularly of leadership, and that we need to rethink, what does social media mean to us as imams and as individual Muslims? What does social media mean to you? How do you engage it? Why do you engage it? What do you intend to get off of it? Secondly, as I said in the other video, we need to permanently alter the way that instruction is given, especially where children are involved, where they're not isolated or allowed to be in isolated situations with anybody. And even though a lot of people are focusing on the male-female aspect, obviously those, if we study our religion and we accept it and submit to it, we already know those safeguards are baked into it, but perhaps we need to come back around to, studying it again so that we can accept in our minds and our hearts that, okay, this actually is something we should follow. But just this situation with Blake Barakat of what she did to her daughter, it's also clear that we cannot completely wholly trust even women to be with children, right? That, and nobody mistake what I'm saying, is that we need to just have stronger safeguards for children as it relates. And also, I'll be honest too, as I spoke to a friend of mine yesterday on the phone who called about this, and he said, man, he works for like a kind of institute that teaches Quran. He said, yo, man, like after we saw your video, we are definitely changing our policies. I said, to more align with what I've been talking about. I said, that's good. You know why? Because you have to safeguard yourself. Just to be honest, like it's not beyond the pale of possibility that somebody could also just say something fabricated. And that'd be the end of your career as an imam or Quran teacher. And so I think everybody will be protected. First and foremost, the most vulnerable people in our community would be protected. Children, women. Secondly, institutions in people's careers will be protected. People's souls will be protected. Even if you're a person that might have some of these evil inclinations that are in you, and we all have evil impulses, but if we have a structure, as the Prophet ﷺ said, help your brother if he's either dhalim or madhloom. Obviously, as the companion said, it's easy to help a person that is madhloom, but how do we help the dhalim? Help him not oppress. So if we're all struggling with desires and evil inclinations, well, let's change the structure of our community that helps support people overcome these Iblisian impulses that they have. So that's why I wanted to make another follow-up video to this, because I feel that I'm concerned that the conversation is going to go down the wrong path of, individually failing to embody values of our deen. Because even though, just in my opinion, obviously this person, Wisam Sharieff, tragically, fantastically failed, right, to embody the values of the religion. And as Sheikh Joe Bradford said, when you are telling a person to commit such heinous things of sexually abusing a child or another individual and tell them that this is a path to getting closer to Allah, then this is grounds for takfir, right? That this person is a kafir, because you have now made, not only the haram halal, but you've made it like it's, mandub, like it's something praiseworthy. So anyway, I think that we genuinely need a moment of reflection. We need to, as much as this is about these two individuals, obviously, if we want to try to do our best by Allah's permission to not allow this to happen again, then we also have to look at ourselves and say, you know what, we have some gaps in how we have formulated the structure of our community. And, one of the quintessential attributes of a Muslim, and that Islam seeks to, we talk about embodying the values. One of the values of Islam is humility. And so as scholars, board members, imams, regular Joe Schmo Muslims, we need to have the humility to say, we need to do better, work together, so that we can try to, again, by the permission of Allah and within whatever scope that He gives us, to mitigate this kind of harm again. And I, for one, inshallah, hope to be able to, not only ensure that we continue to have these practices as middle ground, but I'm happy to work with anybody to encourage them and provide input to help them make these changes. And again, I do not pretend by any means to have all the answers, but I really want us to have this conversation, and I want it to go, inshallah, in the right direction, and not just simply going down the path of thinking that we can suffice ourselves to just burn the effigy of these two individuals through the effigy of personal failure. And once we've burned that, everything is okay. No, we have a lot of changing, inshallah, to do. But I'm sure you all have a lot of work to do. I do as well, inshallah. So may Allah Ta'ala, again, have mercy on any of the victims in this. May He protect them and heal them and reconstitute them, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala bring justice upon those who inflicted this kind of harm in this life and in the next. And of course, may Allah Ta'ala bless our guide, our master, our prophet, our guide, our messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon also his family, his righteous family, and his noble companions, and anyone that follows him until the end of time. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan again for your time. Assalamu alaikum.